Welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm joined by your regular Wednesday contributors, Colin and Amy Canavan for the Axon Bulletin. Never did I think that the first subject on my list when I came into an Axon Bulletin would be the petrol bombing of Peter Lawwell's house, but it's something that has absolutely dominated the news this morning, and rightly so. An absolutely disgraceful act, and it's somehow managed to drag in individuals from a Celtic State of Mind. Not to make this about us, but just to make it clear that there were tweets out today by Great Pantheon 18, who is someone that we gave a platform to last week, actually, on Wednesday's show, which was going to be a dial-in show. That idea's been scrapped for the time being, because obviously that individual has tried to implicate myself, Amy, Natasha and others in the whipping up of the frenzy which has somehow caused the petrol bombing of Peter Lawwell's house. Absolute nonsense, of course. But the more concerning thing about that, and my entire morning has been dealt with liaising with various individuals. This person has been claiming to be Martin Riley, who is Neil Lennon's agent. It's not Martin Riley, the Great Pantheon 18, pretending to be someone that he's not. I can confirm that is not the case. And Celtic security have been alerted to the fact that there is someone online pretending to be someone he is not, which in itself is rather concerning. So when you wake up, Amy, as a young journalism media student like yourself, and you're getting dragged in to this kind of situation, I mean, it's completely unnerving, first and foremost. It's unacceptable. But as I say, we've got to be vocal in this. We're not trying to make it all about a Celtic State of Mind, but when someone is out there pretending to be quite a high profile figure in the world of Celtic, particularly just now, it's dangerous. It's dangerous because people may turn on that individual, believing it to be the person who is whipping up this frenzy, or they may turn against myself, you or others who have been named in that tweet as well. So I just wanted to put that out there first of all and ask for your reaction to that, Amy.
Yeah, there's no denying it. I've been shaking all morning. I think the first person I actually got in contact was you, because I was like, look, I have no idea what's going on here. I don't understand any of this. As you said, I'm only 20. I'm obviously hoping to pursue a career in journalism, and if this is the norm, then count me out. I don't want to be part of this. This is nothing that I've advocated for, anything like that. There's no denying it, and I'm not even ashamed to say it. I've been really shaken this morning. I've been really upset. My dad works, my mum works, mum's not in the house. I phoned her at her work, I've been phoning my uncle. I don't know what to do. It's not something that you want to be associated with. As you say, I wake up this morning, I have a long live this morning. So one day I don't need to be coming in the studio at a ridiculously early time. So I have a long lie and I come in, and then and that's what you wake up to. And like I say, it's not something that I certainly don't feel I understand how there's any way that we've contributed to it. I think like anything else, yeah, there's no denying it. I've definitely advocated for Lawwell out over the course of the season. But again, as I've been trying to almost like justify all season, I've been thinking, is there anything that I've said? I have no connection to Lawwell, to anybody inside the club. So I don't know the man. I really don't. I am just the general fan. I live out in Edinburgh. I've got no connections to anything in Glasgow like that. I don't know anybody, anyone who knows him. He's been in the role my whole life, pretty much. He's all I've known. So if anything, yeah, I was just looking for a little bit of a shake-up. But, to be, as you say, to be told that we've contributed to this, to a man getting petrol bombed, a house getting petrol bombed, I think his daughters live with him, and I think maybe somebody's reported as well that her daughter's with him, so he's got a grandchild in the house as well. I've got a gran. Like, I've stayed with my gran so many times. It doesn't even matter if I have a gran or if I don't, if I've got a house or not. It doesn't matter. This is a person, this is a family, this is so much more than football. And to be brought into that and to say that we've contributed to that just because we're on a podcast voicing our opinions like any other fans, again, we say we don't talk for the whole Celtic support. I completely understand that, and there will be people who still want Peter Lawwell in the job, but anybody that I've spoken to, I think most people do want a little bit of a change, and we are now getting that change. We need a change. It's fresh. The change in the last 10 years, we would never have had anything like this. Like fan media, it's been a positive change, and the mainstream media will have supported that. Of course, fan media has helped things. It's all about growth and it's all about development. So, to be, like you say, to be brought into that this morning, I have no idea how to deal with anything like this. I'm 20. I have no idea. I'm still, I understand I'm an adult now, and you can maybe say I'm a journalist, but I still go to my mum because my mum's my go-to. So I was shaking this morning. I really was.
Totally unacceptable. And again, it's one of these ones, Colin, I'm not trying to make it about us, but also, the kind of chat around Twitter, around that particular account, who have made this incredible link to the petrol bombing at Peter Lawwell's house, and then started to name individuals, and there were others as well. And people might be saying, don't give them airtime, but this is actually quite a dangerous situation to be in. It's verging on, I guess, a civil, potentially even criminal act to come out and try and blame certain individuals for such a heinous act as petrol bombing someone's house. But then, on the back of all that, Colin, this individual has, gone as far as setting up email addresses which obviously have been used to dial that person in last Wednesday, pretending to be Martin Riley. I was on the phone to Martin when a lot of these tweets were being sent out. It's not Martin. Martin's not done it. I'm not going to, for a moment, say we're close, etc. I've had dealings with Martin Riley from probably 3-4 years ago, Colin, and I can guarantee you he's got nothing to do with this. So that's a concern. It's a concern that the club's security then have to be informed of the fact that there's some kind of troll online pretending to be someone. The only person whipping up anything at this moment in time is the individual behind the Great Pantheon 18 account. And the thing with that as well, Colin, is just get another example of this online harassment, this online abuse. I've spoken to you about this when we spoke back in October about, me making the point that I thought a change was necessary. And at that time, I didn't know all the circumstances around what was going on at the club. I still don't. Will we ever know all the circumstances, Colin? But you know yourself, people were turning up at the studio. Damage was being done to the vehicle outside. And that, that's tiny compared to what's happening today. But today, even the tweet that was being sent out, trying to all of a sudden look at a criminal situation and say, well, it must be Celtic fans, which is a ridiculous thing to suggest as well, without any evidence whatsoever. But also the other concern is, after what's happened at the weekend there, and then looking at the situation as we are just now, who on earth would want to come to Glasgow to be a manager or even a player at one of these football clubs? And again, people might say, well, you're talking about a situation as if it's a football fan that's done this. We don't know the circumstances, Colin. Of course we don't.
Look, I just want to start off by just, Amy, I'm sorry that anything that's came up, I hope you're okay. You, as you said, you're still really young, and this is a career for you. For people like myself, for other ones that come on the podcast, this is a hobby that we come on and do this. You've got a career ahead of you, and to get dragged into something like that, it doesn't set the kind of person that you are. And I can see it in the comments already that everyone's got your back. So continue to do what you want to do, because you'll go far. On the idea of the Peter Lawwell thing, first of all, our best wishes are passed on to Peter and his family. At the end of the day, these are human beings, and they were targeted in this heinous attack last night. They do not deserve anything that happened to them last night. To attack someone's home, to attack someone's property is beyond any sort of reasonable kind of action that anyone could ever explain to me. Now, Peter Lawwell, yes, okay, Celtic fans have asked for him to leave the club, and he's doing so. He's left the club. He's going to be leaving his role. We've got a new person coming in, but the man is doing a job the same way that you guys are coming on here and doing a job when you're coming on to do the Bulletin day after day. At the end of the day, everyone's a human being, and no one deserves that sort of thing. And for someone to come on and try to be someone else and stir up this sort of hate, it's undeserved and it's completely unnerving. it gets to the point where someone's pretending to be other people, or someone is digging up old information from years ago. Seriously, get a life. Get a life. And for the person or the people that carried out these crimes, and it's not just Peter Lawwell's house that was targeted, I believe James Mortimer's house and other houses in the Bothwell area were attacked. Just, I hope that you're caught, and I hope that you serve the time for what you've done, because that quite easily could have ended up a lot worse. And
absolutely.
Thankfully it never.
Could have ended in absolute tragedy, Colin, and it brings everything really into perspective. This is a football podcast. This is a Celtic broadcast. It's something we do every single day. And now that we've spoken about that big kind of headline around the petrol bombing at Peter Lawwell's house, which is a disgrace, and we've also called out someone who's trying to whip up a frenzy, albeit on a much smaller scale, online, and I think that's completely necessary, because if you don't call it out, Amy, you're giving them a free platform to have a free dig and a free hit here and there, and you know, all it takes is for a few people to pile up on that as well, and it's not nice when you're on the receiving end of that kind of abuse. So let's move on to other matters. Colin Watt, you had lined yourself up to be presenting today. You were, sending me your agenda, all killer, no filler, you told me. So let's start off. Let's start off with the Scottish national team. There loads of chat over the last few weeks about the performance of David Turnbull this season. Will he get picked? Will he not get picked? Has it all come a bit late for him? I look at that squad there, and I think that it's been bold in some ways. I think there's a few players in there that I'm delighted have been selected. It's brilliant to look down the list and see the name of Dykes. I have long advocated for him to sign for Celtic, obviously for obvious reasons. But what's your thoughts about who made it and who didn't make it in terms of Celtic?
First of all, congratulations to the 6 Celtic players that did make the squad. So those are Greg Taylor, David Turnbull, Callum McGregor, Ryan Christie, James Forrest and Jack Henry. I mean, from memory, I can't really remember many other Scotland squads that have had that deeper representation coming from Celtic.
World Cup 98. Sorry to burst your bubble.
Well,
World Cup 98.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Paul. This is the first major tournament that I will remember. I was still 3-4 when. It's no
excuse. It's no excuse. At that point, you should have already had a season ticket for a couple of years, mate.
No, but it's good to see that amount of people there. The big surprise for me is Ryan Gold not being included within the squad. And if I was part of the Celtic coaching staff, I would seriously be looking at trying to bring someone like Ryan Gold to the club this summer. He's available on a free transfer. He's one of the hottest players in the Portuguese league. Hottest as in these talents on the park, not his looks, obviously. But yeah, some real interesting surprises. Billy Gilmore included in there. Which I think is definitely deserved for his performances for Chelsea, and Nathan Patterson as well at right back. That'll be an interesting one to see who gets the nod between him and Stephen O'Donnell. But yeah, no Lee Griffiths. Does that really come as a surprise to anybody?
Well, I stick by the fact that Lee Griffiths is the finest striker that Scotland has available to them. But for all the other reasons that we've been angry about and frustrated about this season, Amy, he's not in the squad. But what I've got to say as a caveat to that is that, that there's absolutely no way he was going to get picked, Colin. I mean, that would have been an absolute wild card, a couple of appearances here and there as a sub. He needed to be playing consistently this season, Amy, for himself. If this was his ambition to go to the finals, is it his final chance? Who knows what happens in football? But for the Celtic cause, for 10 in a row, this whole thing is basically the result of all of that, I think, Colin. And Lee Griffiths, if he was serious about this, he had to be playing games at least by the turn of the year, Amy, and he's just not been playing the games.
Yeah, we've said it time and time again. He had this great incentive, even in the last few weeks, even under Kennedy, he had an incentive that many other players didn't have, that he had the opportunity to break into the squad. And this was even before the injuries to McBurney. there's Kevin Nisbet's came out in almost nowhere on the Scotland scene this season since moving to Hibs. We all know about him at Dunfermline, we certainly did, but he's broke onto the Scotland scene. And then, if you were naming your Scotland squad last week or the week before, you're just trying to guess, you would have had Nisbet there, because even in this short period of time, he's managed to overlap and put himself in a front runner. Some of my friends were even putting Lawrence Shankland before Lee Griffiths as well, and Shankland's not been hitting the heights this season, so there were opportunities there. And like I say, time and time again, there's been that carrot at the end of the season, really, not at the end of the stick, at the end of the season for Griffiths, to break into this squad. This is, as Colin said, it's the first one that he can remember. It's the first one of my lifetime.
Wow.
Stop rubbing it in. Stop rubbing it in, Amy.
It's a terrific thing to, you want to be involved in. And it's always the case, and you're not advocating for injuries to anyone, but from that last camp that was, I think, at the end of March, you knew there was going to be injuries, and because there always is, and especially with Scotland, there's definitely going to be, people are going to miss out. So there was a chance there, and you have no idea what if Clark was going to take, 5 attackers, 6 attackers, so there was always that little bit of space for Griffiths. But as you say, he's just not done it this season. He's not done it for Celtic, and he's certainly not had this goal in mind. And you'd think after, the penalty shootout and taking that penalty, stepping up, that he'd think, that merits something, and it does, and everybody will hold him for that. So he had that little bit even ahead of others. Clark obviously sticks by him. He included him in that camp when he again wasn't even playing that much. So it wasn't like he had this chip on his shoulder that there was no chance he was getting in. There was a chance and he missed it and he blew it.
The thing is, Paul, see if you're playing devil's avocado, you've got James Forrest in there, who is someone who missed basically most of this season.
Avocado.
Yeah, devil's avocado. I heard that a couple of weeks ago. I'm keeping that one. If you look at James Forrest, it's someone who wasn't involved for the vast majority of this season through injury. Came in, he's maybe only played 6-7 games since that. You're looking at it, he was on, he's been in and out the squad since he came back in. Mm-hmm. But yet Clark clearly knows the kind of player that he is, and he can rely on him to come back into the squad. Griffiths has actually played 26 games for Celtic this season, and he scored 7 goals. Now, looking at it, when you look at the 3 strikers that's picked ahead of him, each of them have scored more goals than him, but they've also played 40 odd games, showing that they're reliable and they can be called upon. So even if Griffiths only made 20 odd appearances, he had to put the ball in the back of the net more often, and he had to show that he was fit and he was committed to the squad. Forrest missed the whole season, comes back for maybe 10 games at the end and shows that he's ready to take that place. So there was an opportunity for him, but I think Griffiths totally blew it.
When we look back, this is connected to the season we've just endured. When we look back on this season, one of the big things that I'll always go back to is Lee Griffiths. And now, you look at the turnaround last season, or was it now 2 seasons ago, whereby Griffiths comes back in, we start playing with him and Edward up front, and it clicked, Colin, and we started seeing an upturn in performances. You're kind of hoping all season that was going to happen this season, and it didn't. And even when Griffiths got a chance, he was in and out of the side. I think he's been available for selection a hell of a lot more than James Forrest. But as soon as Forrest comes back in, he's making an impact. He's getting up to match fitness, something that Lee Griffiths hasn't managed to get to. So, I mean, Steve Clark, I think you're looking at a 26-man squad, isn't it? And there can be no passengers. There can be absolutely no passengers. My real sadness is around the fact that I've got no doubt he's the best striker in Scottish football. He's the best Scottish striker that we have available, and it's other reasons that have prevented him from appearing at potentially the only finals tournament that he can for his country. I'm looking at some of the names though, when you think about individuals, and obviously you need to get the correct blend, Colin, but I look at the names in this squad, people like obviously Kieran Tierney, Andy Robertson, Turnbull, McGinn, Gilmore, Armstrong, McTominay. That's quite an exciting team for me looking at that. And, up front, when I look at the strikers, I watched a fair bit in this, but I kept an eye on him when he signed for Dunfermline. I've spoken to people who've been involved in his kind of earlier youth career, talking about the step up. Where can he go in relation to his own career? I know there was interest. I think there was a bid of £2.5 million in January. Hibs stood firm. Yeah. Birmingham were in for him, Colin. Yeah. Hibs stood firm. But since then, Ron Gordon has suggested that 1, possibly 2 Hibs assets will be sold in the summer. I know your feelings on Lewis Ferguson. What's your thoughts on Nisbet in relation to Celtic? And I'm going to ask you that on the back of me mentioning Lyndon Dykes, right? Because Lyndon Dykes was available for £2 million. I'm not saying, people, I keep hearing this thing, but he's no Celtic class. I hear it all the time about players, Colin. He would have done a better job than Bayo and Klimala and arguably Lee Griffiths for Celtic this season.
I mean, all you need to take a look at is the career trajectory of these players. You're looking at Dykes, who was he Queen of the South before he went to Livingston. You get Kevin Nisbet, who was also playing in the Championship before he went up to Hibs. These are guys that have shown that if they can do it at one level, they can do it at another level. And there's always a thing, if you're a goal scorer, you always score goals, no matter which level you're playing at. And these guys have shown it. Even when Dykes has stepped up into the Scottish national team, he's shown that he can do it on that level as well. His move to Queen's Park Rangers has worked out really well for him. So I don't understand that kind of narrative that they could never make the step up. If you're scoring goals, you'll score goals. And Nisbet, for me, has definitely been one of the best players in Scotland this season. I know by speaking to Jack Ross that he highly rates him. I know John Collins came out a couple of weeks ago and said that he feels as if he has to do more. He has to sort of improve his movement in and around the box. Look, if you're getting a service to him, he's going to stick the ball in the back of the net. And at the end of the day, that's what you want to see is a striker. You want somebody that's going to be in and around. Gary Hooper made a career out of that at Celtic. And for years we've been saying that we've been missing that penalty box striker. I think Kevin Nisbet could do that. Now it all comes down to how much you're looking to pay for someone of Nisbet. As you said there, I think they turned down a deal of about £2.5 million in January. If Hibs are really needing to sell a player, how much can they hold out for? I think if he's available for around about £2.5-3 million, considering that's the kind of money you spent on Klimala, it would make sense for us to go down that route.
I think we're all of the kind of understanding now, Amy, that the days of us trying to pluck a young Polish striker from a fairly obscure side in a fairly obscure league for £3.5 million, I think those days are gone. Would you much rather put your money into a player that, as Colin said before, he's proven domestically that he can do the business?
Yeah, absolutely can. You know, I know we keep saying that we need strikers who can't just do it domestically, or not even just strikers, we need players who can do it on the European stage. But the problem is when we go and get these so-called strikers that can do it on the European stage, or we hope could, you're looking at Klimala, Yeti, never mind the European stage, they're not even doing it on the domestic level. So let's bank the domestic level first. You know, that's where we have to aim. I appreciate a club like Celtic, we have to be looking for Europe. I totally and utterly get that. But we also need to have that basis at domestic level. You know, we can't be thinking, oh, right, we're forced to play Ryan Christie in a false nine, or whoever it may be, Mikey Johnson in a false nine, Elianusi in a false nine. You need to have that go-to, really, and like you say, Nisbet's proved it, and he's continuing to prove it, and that's where we should be looking. Again, as Colin says, there's 6 players in the Scotland setup. I know it's not all about having Scottish players at Celtic, I appreciate that, but again, it's great for the national side. You're keeping these guys together, it's a bit of unity, and of course you want players who are internationalists. You do. And if it's Nisbet, it doesn't matter if it's only a Scottish internationalist. Sorry, you're linking them up like you say. There's with Forrest. Steve Clarke would be absolutely jumping at that if you had, you know, Nisbet and Forrest linking up all season. There you go. There's a partnership, and it does. And you can see obviously it's different. You're going from system to system, but the partnerships, they work. Of course they do. So I would definitely go for him, like you say, instead of plucking out some Bulgarian league, Polish league, league in Belgrade. I don't know.
See the big thing as well, Colin, sorry to interject here, but you know, even when we actually go for quality, and I'm talking about supposed quality, I guess, right? So you go out and you get a player who has proved himself with Schalke and Timu Pukki. And I heard Neil Lennon talking about Pukki just over the last few days. And you bring him into the Scottish game and it doesn't work. So there's no magic formula for this. Then you look at Scott McDonald. I mean, he had obviously a few different teams down south, obviously coming over from Australia. He was at Wimbledon, he played for Southampton briefly under Gordon Strachan, but he made his name at Motherwell. And people, maybe turned their nose up at signing a guy for under £1 million from Motherwell. And obviously because of Black Sunday, they maybe turned their nose up. But he not only scored goals domestically, he did it in Europe for Celtic. So we can take a player if they're able to elevate themselves from that. Because there's loads of examples, Colin, where it doesn't work. I would have put money on Scott Allen being a success at Celtic. I thought that he was a type of player who could have played the Celtic way, as cliched as that sounds. And maybe, well, obviously I was wrong, but maybe I was wrong when you look at his career since he's left the club. I mean, he's hardly, but he's had these issues, personal issues, health issues. So there's no magic formula, but you're looking at these players, and I remember making the point when we qualified around the fact that Stephen O'Donnell and Andy Robertson famously and Declan Gallagher had all been at Celtic for X amount of years, never made an appearance, and here they are playing for the best Scottish or the most successful Scottish side in a generation. And a lot of people said, well, you never know, we were actually right to free Andy Robertson, etc. And I get all that, but when I'm looking at that squad, there's a real Celtic flavour to it. Craig Gordon is in there. You've got obviously Stuart Armstrong is part of the squad as well, and John McGinn, but we won't get into the John McGinn discussion. What I want to point out though, Colin, is some of the words you said around Craig Gordon leaving at the beginning of the season. I haven't forgotten, and you did speak about how that was the wrong move for Celtic to let Craig Gordon go. With hindsight, how right you were.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are things that's always going to happen. You can throw 100 things out and one thing's going to stick, and unfortunately for us this season it's been the fact that we let Craig Gordon go. I don't think Gordon kind of covered himself well when he came out and had his attack at the club and the platforms that he used to do that, but he believes he wasn't treated fairly. His wages were dramatically cut in the offer that they were giving him, but look, he's shown the quality that he's still got. He's doing it at Hearts, he's still doing it for the national team. I've got to think, when's the last time that a championship player was probably called up to the Scotland squad? You're thinking Lawrence Shankland, and then before that, who knows? So he's shown that if he's good enough, he will be called up, which is a great trait of Stevie Clarke's Scotland squads. When you look at that, the Scotland squads came on so far from the days of going away to the Czech Republic and playing 4-6-0 and having no recognised strikers in the squad. And that comes down to a lot of the fact that Celtic have brought through a lot of these players that you just mentioned. Your kind of Kieran Tierney's, your Robertsons and stuff, and you've got
he's doing that thing again. There is only one Tierney in that squad, Colin.
Right, okay, sorry. But guys like Robertson
singular
as well.
Yeah.
Guys like Robertson, Armstrong. So having that flavour, they've played at the high level, and it's only good for the national team as well. And I'm really, really looking forward to the tournament coming up. I think the first game's on the 14th of June, and looking at it, I think we've got a good chance of getting out of that group.
See, this is a time for heroes. You are too young to remember finals. I'm thinking back, I was too young to remember the 1978 one. I wasn't even born, although I was born later on. 1982, can't remember that. Vaguely, Mexico 86. My first real tournament that Scotland were in was Italia 90. And we do have an Italia 90 bag out there in the studio as well with Charles. So you remember the tournament Scotland were involved in, and it's a time for heroes. It creates absolute icons for the country. Everybody who hasn't experienced it are in for a brand new experience. Who do you think, looking at that squad, Amy, could be the heroes of this generation?
You look at Dykes, you really do. I think that there's a lot of excitement around him, and there has been the last few years. That's where I look and you think, if there's a little bit there's a spark coming, I think it can come from him. Shea Adams as well, that's really exciting. And I think as well, my generation, I think I remember at the time there were a lot of, when he was first announced in that last camp, there was a lot of people going, he's English or whatever, he's now just wanted to play for Scotland because we're at a major tournament. I'm not having that, He's here to play. He is a top class player. He's playing in one of the best leagues in the world. It's certainly not the best league in the world, but he's up there and he's scoring goals and he's in form. So who cares if only he now wants to play for Scotland? I'm more than happy to get on that bandwagon. So I'm excited to see him. In midfield, it is John McGinn. It certainly is. I don't want to touch on him too much, but I'm saying obviously Dykes could produce a spark, but if there's a little moment of magic, it's certainly going to be coming from McGinn, you'd like to think so. And then you look even deeper, really, and I'm really excited at the addition of Billy Gilmore. I'm talking about that this is my first major tournament, and it's his as well in his lifetime, and he's playing in it. That's incredible. So it's absolutely great for him to be in and around that camp, even if he doesn't get a game at this age. And you can even look at Nathan Patterson as well. Yeah, okay, fine, he's a Rangers player, but for so many years we say, right, we look at Germany, we look at Spain, we look at France. Why do they integrate youngsters? Even England, why do they bring in all these youngsters? Why though at Scotland do we have this thing that, if you're not old enough? No, if you're good enough, then you're old enough. So we can't complain now that 17, 18, 19-year-olds are being involved. It doesn't matter who they are, they're involved. It's fantastic. So I think you've got to have a little bit of excitement with him. It's great going forward. Nathan Patterson's so young and he's going to be involved in this camp. Who cares that he's not maybe even been to one before? This is great to be bringing forward. We can't guarantee, we can't bank that we're going to make another one, the next one in a few years' time. So to have somebody that young already who's going to have that experience and can take that forward for your next 10, 12 years, because you're looking at your experienced heads in this team right now. Look at Craig Gordon, David Marshall. They've been in and around the business for forever. This is still their first time. We don't have an experienced player who's ever been to a major tournament internationally, so it's great at that young age that even Patterson's being involved. If you asked me this morning for my squad, would you have been in there? No, but again, I just think you've just got to. There's no point dwelling over it and thinking, I wouldn't have him, wouldn't have that. It's fantastic just to have these young guys in and like you say, 6 Celtic players, and it's exciting.
It is. Now, sorry Colin, on you go.
I was going to say, if Chelsea go on and win the Champions League, will that be Gilmore being the first Champions League winner to be involved since Paul Lambert then? Would I be right in saying that?
Robertson.
That Scotland squad.
Robertson,
yeah. Completely forgot Robertson.
I thought you meant a major tournament, but yeah.
At a major tournament you'd have Robertson as well.
Yeah.
So having that experience in that squad of guys that are playing Champions League football, Europa League football as well,
massive.
That's got to come down to something.
It's massive, Colin. You look at I look back to 86. All you need to do is look at that squad that Scotland took to Mexico in 1986, right? There were some world-class players in that squad. There were some world-class players left behind. Kenneth Dalglish didn't go because there was a bit of a war of words because Alan Hansen had been dropped, etc. Everybody knows the story. But you look at every part of that team had absolute quality. At that time, Scotland could have picked a forward line consisting of the likes of Brian McClare, Maurice Johnson, Frank McAvenny, Steve Archibald, Alan McCoist, Kenny Dalglish, who was left behind. Unbelievable. You look at the midfield at that time with Paul McStay, Graham Souness, at that time. Unbelievable team. And now, the big part of that was a lot of the players, Charlie Nicholas as well, a lot of the players were down south, they were based down south, and you look at the squad we've got now, and we do have that, Colin, so they're playing at a high standard, domestically, but also in Europe. And I just think, people have maybe said, you don't support Scotland, this and that. I think there's been a lot of fatigue because you've basically been watching really, really poor Scotland teams for 23 years. They might call me a glory hunter and this and that. I'm watching it, I'm going to enjoy it. I want Scotland to win, and I want to see the Celts doing well that are in the squad as well. One final point before we move on. Jack Hendry. Now, we've spoken about this before, Colin. We've asked the question last week around Jack Hendry. Does he come back? We spoke to the Belgian football correspondent, Amy, who said yes, Celtic should bring him back in. Yeah. If we don't, and he goes out there and has a cracking tournament, I think we might live to regret that.
Yeah, I'd say so. And to be honest, I've not been able to see a lot of Jack Hendry this season, so I'm looking forward to seeing him playing for Scotland. I think his performances were okay when he came back into the squad. I'll be interested to see who gets the centre-half pairing. I think Scott McKenna will be kind of guaranteed it, and then it'll be who plays alongside him, whether they play 3 centre-halves or they play 2. I know they've moved Tierney into sort of left centre-half at times. But yeah, as you said, if Henry goes on and has a good tournament, then I'm sure there'll be plenty of suitors for him. And that probably goes the same for guys like Ryan Christie as well, if he gets on to make some minutes, especially with him only having so long left on his contract. So yeah, it's great to see them in. It probably puts them in the shop window probably benefits both sides in some scenarios.
Well, you look at a couple of the players, Ryan Christie, right? So we know the contract situation there, Colin. Inverness Cali have got a 15% sell-on fee on Christie, so they'll be watching the situation very, very closely. You look at Nisbet. I was talking to someone in my hometown, my home city, it is actually, of Dunfermline, who was suggesting that Dunfermline have a 20% sell-on Nisbet. So they'll be looking at a situation where, you know, if he has a good tournament, if he features, has a good tournament, Hibs do cash in on him. You know, you've got these kind of smaller clubs who need the cash, Amy. So a good Scotland squad, a good Scotland performance benefits other clubs on a secondary level as well.
Absolutely, it's just that domino effect, isn't it?
It definitely is. I mean, Nisbet, even at $2.5 million, that kind of, 20% of that for a club like the Pars is massive. I know that they held off when he was originally being chased by a number of clubs. There was a bid of 500 grand and knocked that back. I think he actually went for 300,000 quid to Hibs. Now, I'll tell you what, they've done that a few times. You look at the Hibs contingent in that squad. They brought John McGinn, I think, for 300 grand from St Mirren.
Yeah.
They brought in Nisbet for 300 grand. They've taken a punt, Colin, on these domestic players, and obviously it's proved well for them as well. Loads of comments coming in. Amy, supporting yourself, Natasha and the Axom team around those unsavoury tweets that came out today trying to link us in to the petrol bombing at Peter Lawwell's house. So thanks everybody for the comments. We really appreciate them. For example, Hypo543, well, Axom, I have highlighted some of the disgusting comments on here lately from people, and they have been ignored because they are of a Celtic persuasion. But this is frightening. You're doing a job. And we've also got Zinko Vix, welcome back, commenting on YouTube. Enough is enough. This hatred and bile needs to be dropped big time. There is banter, and then there is this. This is when it brings home, Colin, just how serious the situation is. Chris M, Axom is grounded and not a hate group. This is lunacy. Grown adults make their own decisions, and if they try to blame groups or individuals in motivating them, it shows how weak those individuals are. So I'm sure that will develop, and we're hoping that the investigation into the criminal act at Peter Lawwell's house will be swiftly resolved as well. Really unsavoury to hear what was going on there. Now, Colin, prior to the big story breaking this morning, you were talking about the football. You were doing some polls on Twitter. People will be thinking, what on earth are you talking about? Player of the year? Has there been one? Anyway, what did you find? What was the player of the year, young player of the year, goal of the season?
So it's interesting. I mean, I don't know how many people actually realise, but ahead of the game against St Johnstone last week, there was actually a broadcast on the Path to Paradise. This might be part of the added value that they've been trying to throw at us, that highlighted the Player of the Year, Young Player of the Year and the Goal of the Season awards. Probably most people missed it because it wasn't very well advertised. No surprise there, considering the communications we've had out the club recently. But the winner of both awards, the Player of the Year and the Young Player of the Year, was David Turnbull. Now, I put out polls last night, and it was actually very close for the Player of the Year award between David Turnbull and Chris Ayer. Now, see, when you look at it, I think when we go back to the start of this season, and Neil Lennon was mentioning that there was players that were looking to make their way out of the club, and that interest was there from AC Milan for Chris Ayer. I think he generally was one of those ones that was looking to move on. But what has to be commended about him is he's put that behind him, and he's probably went on to have one of his better seasons in what is a pretty poor Celtic squad. Is this just my opinion, or do you think he's probably one of these as well?
If I was to name a Player of the Year this season, and I'll ask Amy her view on this, my Player of the Year would be Christopher Ayer, without a doubt. Now, I understand that a lot of people think that defensively there are frailties there, and how could you argue with that when you look at the defence this season, Colin? How could you argue with that? I could stand up for him and say that obviously he's not had a settled back line, including the goalie, etc, etc, but I'm looking at his performances as a defender, and will they ever be developed? I don't know if he'll become a better defender. But in terms of performances, attitude, as well, I think, when you look at Chris Ayer. If anything's been going on in the background, I've not seen it in the performances of Chris Ayer. He's not always been great, but I think it's been very slim pickings if you're looking for a player of the year. Personally, I would go for Chris Ayer. Amy, what would your shout be?
I think I'd go Chris Ayer as well. Probably just, like you say, for the duration as well. Obviously, he has been all season Turnbull, not through no fault of his own. Obviously, only really kicked onto the scene a little bit later. There are definitely flaws in Ayer's defending. There certainly is. I know we've really just capitalised on everything that he's done well, because we need to just have a look at anything sort of positive, and if he is producing it, then fine, fair enough. But I think what you said there was quite vital. I think you can't really give anyone player of the season based on performance. Like, you can't, and I don't appreciate that at all. I don't think you can really praise anyone on a side like that. But if you look at, Ayer's versatility, his attitude, like you say, when he shifted to right back, that were some of his best performances, really were. So it was just great to see him take on, I think, that bit of leadership as well. I think he certainly helped out Callum McGregor a lot, because as much as we all just assumed that McGregor would really, take the reins really well and make that a natural progression, it's not really worked out yet anyway. So I certainly think having Ayer behind them definitely helped. So it would be between Ayer and Turnbull. I know Colin, you asked me to have a definite one. I don't have a definite one. I'll go,
I can let you away with that, it's alright.
I'll go Ayer. Okay, Ayer.
See, the thing is with Ayer, right? He's 6'6", and although he's still young, he's only 23, and a lot of the criticism comes from the fact that he's 6'6", but when he jumps, he's 5'4", because he struggles to win the balls in the air. He's only scored 2 goals this season. Do you think that's something that could be kind of brought out of him in a new manager and a new coach, someone that's actually going to develop him? Or by the age of 23, should you really get to that stage where if you are a centre half, and a lot of people say he isn't a centre half, then you should kind of already have that one ticked down? That's a basic.
Well, I always think a footballer can be developed. I don't think that they ever stop developing. And you look at the impact. I'll use one example: Brendan Rodgers on Scott Brown. The impact that he had on Scott Brown. A lot of people had written him off in the media, maybe in the fan base. He came in, he played a specific role. I think when you look at the impact that Brendan Rodgers had on Callum McGregor, and such a big impact that I don't think we've seen the same Callum McGregor since Brendan Rodgers left, to be honest with you. And that has been highlighted massively this season, because he's been worse this season than ever before in relation to his consistency. He's been a very consistent performer. So I don't think at his age, Colin, or people may disagree with this, I don't think he's a finished article, but I do think he can improve. Then you also look at the situation where if he was partnered up with someone on a week-to-week basis, and he was able to actually develop a partnership at the centre of defence for Celtic, with a goalkeeper behind him that you could trust, any deficiencies that he does have probably wouldn't be as prominent, because he's maybe not dealing with as much issues if he's playing in a strong back line. Or indeed a strong team, because a lot of this was set plays that we were giving away daft free kicks. I remember a free kick getting conceded 10 yards inside their own box, and I already was concerned, because any opportunity for any team to loft the ball into our box this season was a chance at a goal, and he was part of that problem. But I don't think we're going to have the opportunity ourselves to see that development, because I do feel that he's one of these guys that will move on. I think that of all the kind of big hitters, Colin, he's the guy I would try and keep, to be honest with you. And I think, when Julien comes back in, we do look back on the partnership they had. I'm not rewriting history here. I know we were calling out for another centre-half at the early part of this season, but I think that there was an understanding there, Amy, and it all boils down to the headline today, which we're going to get onto. It all depends on the new manager coming in.
Absolutely, it does. And as Colin says, maybe with a little bit of coaching, a little bit of better coaching, Ayer may be more towards the completed article, because he's certainly not like that. He's not the finished product. But as you say, it is all about the management, of course it is, and getting that next, like you say, that next leader in the new era in so many different positions, that's vital.
What was other categories, Colin?
So we had the Young Player of the Year as well. Now that is actually quite difficult because there hasn't really been that many young players coming through this season.
What do you determine as young though as well? Sorry, because that annoys me. Like, what do you determine as young?
What would you say?
Like, there you go. I think some clubs even say like 23. That's not young. We're just saying as well, like at Ayer's age, should he be fully developed? What would you say? Would you say 21? Would you say I'd go 20 under? I would go 20 under.
I'd say 21s because you can play at your national level at under 21s, and then beyond that, that's when probably you come out of that category. And David Turnbull's probably on the verge of that now. He's 21. Stephen Welsh 21. The other person that was included was Karamoko Dembele. Now you've got to include him because he's the only one else that's actually had a couple of games this season. You would have probably threw Jeremy Frimpong in there if he'd have lasted the full season, but he moved on. And then young Adam Montgomery's only really had one start, so it's hard to put that in there. So it probably was a straight shootout between Stephen Welsh and David Turnbull, and probably to no surprise, David Turnbull came out just like he did in the Celtic poll. Now, I got a bit of stick a couple of weeks ago when I said that Stephen Welsh is probably going to be a squad player for Celtic next season, and I think that's still pretty fair. I can't see him being a first choice centre half at Celtic. I think he'll be someone that comes in when there's an injury. I don't think he's got the ability going forward to be a sort of mainstay in the Celtic defence. And for me, my concern about him is he is 21 now. So if we do go out and sign 2 or 3 centre halves in the summer, what do you do with Stephen Welsh? Do you keep him in the squad to fill in if there is an injury? Or at that age, you want them to go out there and to get the first team experience and put them out on loan?
I definitely wouldn't put him out on loan. I just think that he's proved himself to be a first team player, not always a first pick, Colin, and it's the area of the park that we really need to strengthen. But when you've made 20 odd appearances under the circumstances he's made them under, then I think he deserves to be a first team player. He needs to be in the first team squad. I don't think it would do him any good at this stage to loan him out. The argument might be, look how well Jack Hendry did. We need a familiarity, I think, as well, moving into next season. We've spoken about that. There's going to be a massive upheaval in the squad, and I have been a big fan this season is Stephen Welsh. I think to be thrown in the way he wasn't ideal, but we had no other choice, unfortunately. But every single day of the week, my young player of the year would be David Turnbull. He's really excited me this season. I would have been gutted actually if he had not been picked for the Euro squad, and I think that he's going to show his real value if he gets minutes, and I hope he does get minutes in the finals as well. Amy, I mean, would you agree with that? I know that it's again slim pickings on the young player front.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I said that the last time. I think we came on as well right after for the last camp, the squad announcement, and I was like, the big omission has to be Turnbull, and I was scratching my head because then I was a little bit worried. You think, and then was Clark really not thinking about him for the summer? Because I think if he had this in mind, I would have had Gilmore in the last camp, and I would have had Turnbull in the last camp, and then even at that point, if Nathan Patterson was on the fringes, and at that time he was sort of playing, I'd have had them in that camp just to even be, just in and around that. I appreciate obviously they have under 21s and whatnot, and all of them I've played a decent amount of games for them, and Gilmore in particular travelled everywhere with Scotland under 21s because he's been in the setup for so long. So it is fantastic to see him in there, and again I would have him as my young player as well, and you've got to hope that he gets some minutes this season, this campaign, and like you say, you just got to take it from there, and anything from that is just certainly a bonus.
What I've got to say on David Turnbull is when you look at him, obviously we looked to sign him the season before we did. And everybody's seen the pictures of both him and Neil Lennon inside the Celtic boardroom being interviewed for Celtic TV. And then what happened to Turnbull had the potential to completely ruin his career. Now, there was no guarantees that someone like him would have came back from what he's went through. Both physically and mentally, that must have torn him apart. To have your dream move totally ripped away from you because of something that you weren't aware of. And if anyone hasn't seen the documentary that Motherwell put out, it's a definite watch. It was really, really good to see the attitude that Turnbull had to committing to come back to be as good as he can be. Now, I know there was a lot of fans at the time who were writing him off, saying he doesn't really want to move, and then when we were interested in him again, we can get better than that. Look, David Turnbull's been a fantastic signing. He's been somebody that I've been watching for a number of years, and I think he can go on to be as good as John McGinn in that Scotland midfield. He can go on to have that sort of career. He'll be at Celtic probably for another couple of years, and then we'll start seeing the bigger teams interested in him, and he probably will move on. But the first thing I would be doing after these European Championships, if he gets any sort of minutes, is tying him down on a longer term deal, so that if he does then decide to move on, we get the most that we can for him.
I think you do that straight away, Colin, because I think he's given us enough of an insight into the true ability and the potential that he has, barring injury, that he will fulfil his potential. So, yeah, David Turnbull every day of the week. And your other prize, before we speak about the other big issues around Celtic Football Club, was it the goal?
Goal of the season. Now, for me, my memory's not been greater this season, and for obvious reasons, but I took a look at the ones that were put forward by Celtic, and there was a couple, thanks to Boys Analytic and Lewis Laird for pointing out the ones that I missed out. But I had Sorrow's goal against Dundee United, David Turnbull's free kick against Hibs in the first COVID game after Dubai, McGregor's goal earlier on in the season against Livingston, the one that flew into the top corner, and Edwards against AC Milan. Lewis also threw in the goal by Moy against Lille away, which was a fantastic strike. And Boys Analytic threw in Edwards' goal against KR at the start of the season, where he skinned 6 players and put it into the back of the net. But the goal chosen by the AXOM viewers and listeners was Sorrow's against Dundee United, and I have to say, fantastic goal, and I hope we see a lot more of that from him going forward.
Well, I'm going to break all the rules, and I'm going to say that Edwards' wee dink against Craig Gordon's my goal of the season. I don't care if it's class as last season. It was absolute genius from a player I don't think we'll see in a Celtic jersey again. Amy, over to you.
I would go that as well, actually. I was thinking, and then I was going to message Colin and go, is it a technical that it's not actually this season?
That was the thing as well. That it wasn't anything against Ryan Christie. His 2 goals in the Scottish Cup were outstanding, but it was last season's competition. That's the only reason I excluded them.
If you were to go this season, I'd go Moy against Lille. I would.
Cool. I'm going to stick with the dink. So that's the way it goes, Colin. You break the rules. It's been an interesting morning. It certainly has. And obviously, we were on the end of some nasty tweets, which is nothing compared to what Peter Lawwell has had to deal with. And I just asked the question, who on earth, in their right mind would look at Scotland, Scottish football? Was it a football attack? Obviously, I don't know. But you're looking at a situation where the CEO of Celtic is being petrol bombed. His house has been petrol bombed. You're looking at the scenes. It's just, for me, I think it's really detrimental to what we're trying to do as a football club. We're trying to bring in the best possible individuals to work in the various levels of the football club. So you've got the incoming CEO in Dominic Mackay. You have possibly Eddie Howe, although the deal hasn't been done. I don't think there is enough leaders in that squad to handpick a captain. We probably would all disagree. You might have an opinion on that, Colin, that I'll disagree with. So we're looking at a situation, who will lead us into the new era, on the back as well of the situation that we found this morning in relation to Peter Lawwell's house being petrol bombed. Amy, do you think someone like Eddie Howe's looking at that and thinking, nah, this isn't for me?
I think anyone in the right mind would. I think it certainly has to, who knows how close or how far that this deal really is, but if there are any sort of, personal matters, or if there are any, barriers to moving up, this isn't going to be sending it in the right direction, is it? Would you really be wanting to move your family, your young family, up into, everybody knows that Glasgow is a cauldron anyway for football, and just in Scotland in general is, but if he's wanting to move into really the pit of that cauldron, and then you see something like this happen, and as you say, this isn't really football, what has happened, but we have no idea we really don't have any idea who is culpable for this. But would you, like Paul, you've got a young son, would you move your family to there from down south where you've already had, concerns maybe even moving up here? Would you do that?
Well, this kind of comment concerns me a wee bit. Why would that make anyone not want to come to Scotland? Happens all around the world. What, CEOs of football clubs get petrol bombed? I don't know if that's the reason why it's happened. We don't know the facts, but let me tell you something, Amy. Even the outpouring of bile this morning from Great Pantheon 18 was bad enough. That's bad enough, because instantly you don't, you can't help yourself but react to that. I'm thinking obviously of yourself and Natasha as well in that respect. You don't even want anybody else within your household to know about these things, because they'll get concerned. What if they find out where you live? That kind of thing. It's easy enough to find out where the studio is based, and as I said earlier in the show, people have come to the studio in person simply for disagreeing with their narrative, So it is a concern. It's a big concern for me. And I think that the last commenter has missed the point a wee bit. Yeah, this does go deeper than football. This is an individual that's maybe looking at Celtic and saying, well, we're going to enter a goldfish bowl here that I don't want to bring. I don't want to bring myself or my family into, Colin, and that does concern me a bit. And it's horrific, to be honest with you, to be faced with that kind of news this morning. There are other points as well that you wanted to cover in relation to Celtic. But I can confirm that we'll certainly not be bringing in a dial-in situation again after the events of this morning, which resulted obviously in us having somebody on last week, and then them trying to implicate us in the events at Peter Lawwell's house. So in relation to fans returning to stadiums, Colin, there's been a lot of obviously discussions around that. Do you think that the weekend's strict liability, etc., the aftermath of that is going to affect fans, well-behaved fans, which is in the majority, getting back into stadiums and enjoying this sport?
I mean, I would like to think it wouldn't. I'd like to think that this, the incident at Peter Lawwell's house, along with the other incidents that took part in that area, as I mentioned earlier, he wasn't the only house that's been targeted in that area over the last couple of months. I'd like to think that a lot of these incidents shouldn't be tarred with the same brush that everything seems to be tarred with when it comes to football. And I'd like to think that when it comes to the start of next season, when we're starting getting to the pre-season, that we can take that out of the equation and we can start looking ahead to bringing fans back into the games. Now, just before we came on air, it was confirmed that the British and Irish Lions will be playing at Murrayfield on June 26th with 16,500 fans there. Now, that's 25% capacity. It looks as if the Euros are going to be played at 25% capacity. So you'd like to think that when it comes to the start of pre-season, that we can start looking ahead to a stadium being 25% full at the very least. The games that have been played, they are there as the kind of benchmark. We're hoping that when it comes round to the start of July, end of July time, that most people in Scotland will have received their first vaccination. If not, they'll be well on their way to getting their second as well. There comes a point where there's only so much that they can do behind the scenes before they have to start opening things back up. And looking ahead, Celtic are rumoured to be playing West Ham on the 24th of July in a friendly match. I'd like to think that when that comes round, and that's roughly about the same time as the first European qualifier, we can see somewhere in the region of 15 to 30,000 fans in at Celtic Park for that game.
So one of the big things that obviously there was the fans forum last week, Colin. We spoke about some of the negatives out of that. One of the things that did strike a chord is the fact that Dominic Mackay has been involved in getting fans back into stadiums, albeit in a different sport entirely, but he's been at the forefront of that kind of discussion. A Celtic State of Mind will be invited to speak to, not get into a stadium, that's another argument for another day, to speak to the club at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So we'll be talking to the club in relation to how we can work next season, maybe with regards to press conferences and the kind of access, Amy, that we've been kind of pushing for 4 years now. So it's great that there has been a change, if you like, in direction when it comes to the club embracing fan media like Axom and others.
Absolutely, it's fantastic. You know, I've had the opportunity through uni. Obviously, we've got quite. Again, it's all about building up a reputation, and through uni, obviously, we're student journalists, and we've got into grounds, and you know, you're welcomed. It's great, you know, we can sit here and you can slate the mainstream media or whatever, but you get talking to anybody from, you know, the Scotsman, Times, whatever, whoever may be there, they are fantastic with you, and I have no doubts that it would be exactly the same for fan media. I've not spoken to Natasha how she got on at the weekend there, but by all accounts, you know, it's absolutely fantastic that she's getting to go into these grounds. And you know, press accreditation, it's not easy. I've been there, I've been rejected as a student journalist, then it's a tough game to get into, it really is, and especially in COVID times this season, it's difficult because you only have a small number that you're allowed in. Of course, it's gradually increasing, and that is fantastic. But you know, for a growing company like a State of Mind, who's got a good name, a great name, a great reputation, it's the next step. It certainly is. You know, starting to go to press conferences. It's not just like hopping along Easter Road because Celtic are playing. You know, I've been at Hibs press conference, Colin's been to Hibs press conference, Paul, you have as well. We're getting there. You're making these moves. It's not just chucked upon your doorstep. You know, you have to work for these things, and you're going around the right process. And again, as you said, everybody knows where the studio is as well. So you've just got to take into account if it's certain clubs that are letting us in, you've just got to take what you get given.
Absolutely.
I think the thing about that as well, Paul, is a lot of these places that are mainstream media that we see, and the people that work for the mainstream media, they are really getting involved with fan media as well. When you think of some of the guests that have been on all the shows across the State of Mind network, people from Sky, from BT, from the BBC, from the newspapers, that are all wanting to get involved in fan media because they know it's an outlet that people want to listen to. So the fact that the sort of fan media are now being involved in their football clubs, they're also getting involved in things like going and covering the games. It's a great move forward, to be perfectly honest. Fans always want to hear what other fans have to say. They don't want a narrative fed to them. And I know we've seen the things about the Celtic Prava, or whatever it was called, when it comes to the Celtic view, because you're only getting the view that the club kind of want to put out, and that's what makes things like fanzines back in the day and fan media now so popular. So it's great to see that this is progressing to the level where it is an actual outlet that people are tuning in their thousands day after day to listen to normal fans discussing matters that are relating to their own, maybe sometimes other football clubs.
The big thing for me is, it's a game of football. We've all got an opinion. Let's not get too personal on that matter. Let's not try and get pile-ons on social media, because it is very damaging and it's very hurtful for certain individuals to have to deal with that. One final thing I would say, yesterday, Amy, we were delighted to be joined in the studio by a real talent called Brooke Combe, who came in and played a couple of tunes for us. Absolutely astonishing talent. I can't wait for it to be edited and put out on the channel as well. So we're hoping that a week on Saturday you'll be able to watch the Unplugged session plus an interview with Brooke, who, Amy, I believe is going to be absolutely massive.
She absolutely is, honestly. Like I say, I've known her. Like I went through high school with Brooke, and my claim to fame will always be that I was in Brooke Combs' music class. So that's what I'll be known as in a few years' time, because she's phenomenal. You know, we were just sitting there yesterday, Paul, and it was absolutely great to hear her. And like I say, I've been lucky enough, obviously, to hear her many a time. But she's grown in confidence. She's just growing full stop, and the sky is really the limit. And it's just fantastic, like you say, that got her interview with a State of Mind, and it's fantastic, because she's definitely going places.
Oh, without a doubt. So thanks everybody for your support. I've got to say that, and I mean that wholeheartedly. Thank you for tuning in on Twitter, Facebook and YouTube, and thank you to Colin Watt and Amy Canavan for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.